Nico, I'm very happy to have you here. Thank you for joining me. During our coffee chat last week, you told me that you started as a scientist. So, how did you go from chemical engineering to procurement? What is your procurement story?
I'm happy to share it here. So I was trained as an engineer in Delft, and I basically you're growing up with other engineers, right? So you kind of I think you're trained on analytical skills, but not really communications. And I started working with Procter and Gamble, which is consumer good, like a marketing company. So communication was very important, and I had to learn a lot of things there. But after working like 3 years in the lab as a scientist, I felt that we were too far away from the business, right? We were too far away from the consumer. And it's kind of nice to develop new formulations and work on innovation. But I felt that I wanted to get closer to the business. And procurement was kind of relocating from London to Geneva. And then I have to say that it was a career choice and a lifestyle choice because
Okay.
I'm a big snowboarder, and I thought that being able to snowboard every weekend in the winter was going to be a huge add. And so I decided to switch to procurement, and I had a choice to go to marketing, finance, procurement. But I picked procurement because I feel it's an area where you can really kind of run your own business within a big enterprise. And I am a little bit of an independent minded person. So working for corporate was never natural for me. But then if you work in procurement, I think you can really run your own business. And I really enjoy
Yeah.
that. And I've been able to do that for a very long time. So that's why I lasted so long with that one company. But I think procurement careers can be super fulfilling, actually. And I'm really happy I made the switch. And I don't think I would have lasted that long for any one company if I had not worked in procurement.
I totally feel you when you said that in the lab you were missing communication, like communicating with people. I felt totally the same. I'm like, that was the part of the science or being scientist that was the hardest for me. Being close between walls for days or weeks,
Mm-hmm.
not talking to other people, that was like no go for me. So
Yeah.
totally get that. And when you said about marketing, IT that you could choose from, procurement is not the most or not the direction that most people would choose, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah.
It's great.
So I did. I mean, I always liked kind of buying and selling. So
Mhm.
as a student, I was buying and selling cars. I was buying and selling whatever. I found it more interesting than go and work in McDonald's, for example, right? So I was always running a kind of small businesses on the side, and I think you develop your commercial skills. I was exporting cars to West Africa as a business
Wow. Okay.
student. So that requires quite some commercial skills because you negotiate for literally days when you sell a car in these countries. And I really enjoyed that. And so I always enjoyed the commercial side. And then actually my dad worked in procurement for a number of years, and he really
Okay.
enjoyed it as well. And he also is a chemical engineer, so we have quite a few things in common. And then he said, "Well, that's a good area to work in," and he enjoyed it, and I have really enjoyed it as well. Especially because I'm more of the creative buyer, right? So I'm more on the kind of how can I develop options that nobody thought about before. And I think P&G was a very good place to develop that, right? So I think all the
Yeah.
jobs that I've had, when I left the job, it was completely different than when I entered the job. So been able to drive a lot of change and break a lot of boundaries and barriers, actually things that weren't possible before, working with competition or have development work done by outside partners, or having your flagships formulas produced by contractors in Africa. Or we had loads of kind of firsts, and I like that, right? So I mean, I always like to do things that maybe others are too scared to do. I'm kind of I'm attracted by those type of things always for some reason.
And I think when you're procurement, you have to know a little bit of everything from the business, right? You have to know marketing, you have to understand IT, you have to understand HR, and so on. So, yeah, when you want to have the knowledge, like very general knowledge about the company, that's the place to work.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I have loads of stories, right? So I was running contract manufacturing for Europe, Middle East, Africa across business units for 7 years, and we had a very, very good team. And every time the business had like a new plan about how to expand, they would come to us, right? So they were coming to
Mhm.
us for access to new innovations in like devices or air care, or they came to us in terms of entering new markets like the laundry market in South Africa or the bar soap market in Nigeria, aerosol localization in Russia. I traveled a lot to very exotic places, and it's very interesting to try to marry what a global corporation is looking for and then what is locally available, right? In places like
Yeah.
Nigeria or Kenya. I was working in Asia for a while in the same field. So we went to contractors in
Mhm.
Vietnam and Philippines and India. And I think to marry like the kind of your global standards to what is locally acceptable and to bring these things kind of in sync. And obviously, this is not just a matter of it's not a matter of like meeting or ticking the box, right? It's like there's so many things that have to change that if the mindset of the contractor is not flexible enough and willing, if you're
Yeah.
not really to able to partner, then you never get there, right? So I really like the challenge of companies that are completely differently wired and try to marry them with a company like P&G that's been around for 150 years and have global manufacturing standards and is not willing to deviate from these standards in any place in the world, right? So at the
Yeah.
beginning, when you enter a factory and people run around in flip flops and no security metrics or anything, right? You're kind of okay. Well, there's a lot of work to do here, but we
I
got
could imagine how shocked you were
yeah,
seeing
yeah,
that.
yeah. I have seen like a factory in Nigeria, a perfume factory, and the guy who was running it was having a central office in the middle of the factory, and he had like I don't know 70 security cameras in the
Wow.
factory, or maybe
Mhm.
700 security cameras. I don't know. He had 70 monitors in his control
Okay.
room to make sure that nobody was stealing anything, and the
Wow.
personnel had to take fingerprints to enter into the factory. I was like, okay, that's interesting, right? So I mean, these things are like
Risk protection
difficult.
level master, I would say.
Yes, 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 and yeah, I always enjoyed going to these places.
Mhm.
I'm yeah, and I think multinationals kind of struggle
Yeah.
to have product propositions that meet the needs of the local consumers, right? Because we have quality standards that are maybe 5 times what they're used to, and obviously they don't come for free always, right? So you have
Yeah.
to invest, but still, it's great to be in those places and
And
move
what
around.
surprised you the most when you saw all those cultural differences in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in US?
Right.
What was the biggest surprise you had?
Yeah. Well, what I think, right? So I really enjoy doing business in developing countries. Okay, because the flexibility is there, the mindset is there, and when you try to make things work with a supplier in France, for example, or in Germany, you can only make like small changes, right? You can only
Mhm.
get them like making small steps.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you go to Africa or to Vietnam, for example, or India, I mean, if you can only
Everything
make
is
small
possible.
steps, it's going to take 20 years before they produce what you want them to produce and the way you want them to produce it, right? So I really like the developing country mindset, which is much more like can do and open for change. And I always, I feel very encouraged to see how much change is possible in a short period of time when I go to a place like Nigeria, for example, right? I enjoy it. There was one really cool billboard in Nigeria one time because it's such a country with so much optimism. And it said, "The future is bright. Please drive safely." And of course, I
Ah,
think
that's
roads are
beautiful.
not the safest place in Nigeria, right? So it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
but because everybody believes the future is better than today,
Mhm.
people are in a very good mood. They're very optimistic. And
Yeah.
then I go around in some places here in Europe, and people feel like depressed, and the news is bad, etc. And I'm like, okay, well, go to Nigeria and go
Yeah.
and live there for a while, and you'll be happy to come back, right? And see how great lives
That's
you'll
true.
have. So it's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. So let's talk about digital procurement now. What inspired you to create it, and what's the bigger mission behind that platform?
Well, our mission is we empower procurement with technology, okay, which is a very broad mission, and you can go many different ways, right? So you can advise procurement teams on kind of what technology to use, which we've done for about 4 years. You can also help companies implement technology, make technology work, fixing the data structures to be able to get AI agents to work, etc. So it's a very broad. I mean, you can do many things under this banner, but everything is kind of focused on the intersection between technology and procurement. Okay, and I think maybe because I have a background as an engineer and I grew up in kind of spent 6 years at the engineering university with loads of people that were way smarter than me. I know that technology world, I think, relatively well. And I also know the business world and the procurement world quite well because I spent so many years in that. So bringing it together is really cool. We do like solution maps, right? To say, okay, what are the key players in a different areas? So looking at spend analytics or orchestration or e-sourcing or supplier data or risk and compliance, etc. We are very aware of all the solution providers and what they can do. So I think we're in a good place to help companies not spend 2 years to figure out what tech to use, but I think in a couple of months, weeks, we can actually, I think we can put a good roadmap together or a good plan together on what are the solutions to evaluate. I mean, starting your own business is something I always wanted, but I think I was with kind of some golden handcuffs for a little bit too long. So it took me a long time to make the decision to leave, but I think it's been the right decision to say, well, I mean, I'm 53 now. I left when I was 48, the big corporate world, and I think I've learned a ton since I left. So I learned a lot more in the last 5 years than maybe the 10 years before that. And I think that's a good sign, right? So I think people should focus on how much they learn versus how much they earn. I mean, that's always been my advice when I mentor folks. But now I think our business is mostly young people. Actually, we have 19-year-olds running around the business. We've got 35 years old. I'm by far the oldest. And it's very diverse. So I'm happy to say we are more than 50% females. And we have two offices, right? One in Geneva and one in Bucharest in Romania. And we're still building the business, but we have won some nice implementation projects. So we're working on those. So I mean, you have to always start small when you start your own business, right? You can't
Of
run
course.
around and say, hey, I used to be an executive. Well, who cares, right? What you
Yeah.
used to be. I mean,
Yeah.
is what are you doing now and what can you do for us is what matters. So you have to reinvent yourself, right? And I think that's something
Yeah.
that is not always easy. And I think if people think about doing this, they shouldn't wait too long, right? You should not if you have this in mind that you want to do something like this, you should build your network. You should figure out what the niche is that you want to operate in, define it well, and make sure you're good at it, right? And I think then you do well. So
Yeah. You wrote Ariba doesn't have customers, it has prisoners. Right? I have to say that made me smile because I've been there too. Right. And then I saw Sean t-shirt at DPW, which, said, sorry, Ariba sub deserves better. Right.
deserves
So
better. Yes.
yeah, so it feels like more people could relate to that.
Yeah.
Why do you think Ariba has earned this kind of reputation?
Yeah. So I have been following Ariba for 25 years. Okay. And in 2001, Ariba was worth more than General Motors, right? So that was the
Mhm.
dot-com bubble, and
Yeah.
people don't realize that. But the B2B tech or B2B marketplace or platform that would basically remove friction between buyers and sellers, it's not a new idea, right? It's been around
Mhm.
since the internet was invented. Free markets was one of the first companies that was very active in this space with e-auctions. They got acquired by Ariba, and I think Ariba was doing really, really well. And until the dot-com bubble burst, etc., and then what happened? A lot of alternative platforms came up and had different commercial models, right? And a different commercial model where everything is free for suppliers is gonna beat a model that actually lives on supplier fees, which is what Ariba
Mhm.
does, right? With 60% of
Yeah.
revenue coming from suppliers. So I think when you have something that is being obsoleted by new technology, I'm really kind of shocked how long it takes people to move, right? I mean,
Mhm.
what's the inertia, right? And is it
Yeah.
IT? I mean, if things don't work, then stop using it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at the apps on your phone that don't work, I mean, how much patience do you have,
Yeah.
yourself to keep working in apps that don't work, right? I mean, nobody spends half an hour in an app that doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And then people
Absolutely.
spend 10 years in applications that don't work, and they still think that, the next roadmap is going to, I mean, it's ridiculous. And
Yeah.
so I know it's sticky business, but at some point you need to say, well, cut the crap. I'm going to create space for new providers, and I'm going to get rid of stuff that doesn't work. And
Yeah.
and I always try to encourage people to look at that. And the business case is pretty straightforward, actually. I mean, if you look at, this is what I invest in Ariba, this is what the results I'm getting. If I go to alternative platforms with different commercial models, I can say this is what I can achieve, and therefore the business case is there. So in 12 months, you basically be break even. And
Mhm.
from there onwards, you will basically make money. So it's obvious, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I've worked on both platforms for many years. I spent 4 years on Ariba, and I could never get the supplier adoption to work, never. And and nobody can, right? So if you
Mhm.
can't make it work after 4 years, then maybe you should look at something else. But I think no, not everybody's there, but it's also driven a little bit by IT more than procurement. So I think there's many procurement
Mhm.
people that have given up on Ariba, but they don't really have the ability to move like all supplier interactions into a better platform. So
You have been talking about agentic AI. Do you think AI agents can really solve every procurement problem, or are we expecting too much from them?
that's a good question, right? So I guess that's one of the things I'm playing around with at the moment. Um, I think that agentic AI is a real game changer for procurement. Okay, and the reason is, and I think especially indirect procurement, because for me, I work most of my time in direct procurement, um, but the problems there are very different than the problems in indirect procurement. And I think
Yeah.
the indirect procurement is where we have all the complexity. 90% of our suppliers are indirect. 90% of the things that we buy, or maybe 95% of what we buy, of the complexity is in the indirect side. Number of categories that we buy from is on the indirect side, etc. Right? So indirect is a different, much more complex area to generate value as a procurement organization. And there's many companies that don't have an indirect procurement organization, right? They just leave it to the business, and I mean, IT does their own contracts, etc., which I think is
Mhm.
definitely not the best practice, but that's the reality. So in indirect procurement, the big kind of wicked problem is the user experience, right? So even have, like at P&G, we had 600 buyers on indirect and 22 billion in spend. Okay, before we did a digital transformation, if you would ask a question like how much do we spend on marketing agencies, you get a different answer when you ask the question to procurement or to finance, and the difference could be 2x 3x sometimes, right? So if the basic data is in such a scrappy state, then as a buyer, what do you do with 600 buyers in
Yeah.
this space if you can't really, if you don't have good data? So, and the good data only comes from having a very good user experience, right? And get the user to buy the right thing from the right supplier at the right price. And it's very complex. to do that, right? Because with catalogs you can do so much. Then you have many different catalogs. So what catalogs to use for what item? What supplier to use for what item? What buying channel to use? Can I use a credit card? Do I need to? I mean, all these questions are complex. And if somebody goes into your, let's say, source to pay platform, once every 6 months, and you expect them to figure out, pick the right supplier, the right contract, the right item, it's too complex.
Yeah.
It's too many options, right? So I think guiding the user to the right supplier, to the right contract, to the right catalog, and there's nothing else. The agentic AI can do this better than anything or anybody, right? So even if you have a whole service center that guides the user to the right, you will not do as good of a job as agentic AI, as an AI agent, and that's exciting, right?
It
That's something
is.
that we
Yeah.
should we
Yeah.
should not be scared about. We should say, well, this
Hmm.
is this is fantastic, right? We have agents
Yeah.
that help us guide the buyer, right? So we don't have to correct the commodity code, or we don't have to say, well, oh, you should use this vendor versus this vendor, right? You kind of address these things up front, right, in their interaction with the business user. So that's just one example of agentic AI. But yeah, there's like purchase request verification, right? Is the right data there? Do you want people to do that, or do you want an agent to do that? I want an
Mm.
agent to do that because I think
Yeah.
people are, we're wasting people's talents on those type of process steps. So I'm very excited about it. I think it's early days still. So loads of companies are starting up in this space, and that's exciting, right? But I think companies need a little bit of help on how to employ these agents, right? What's the foundation? Is your data good enough to make your agent autonomous? Well, in the beginning, you need to have a human in the loop, right? Then on strategic sourcing, I don't think it's about a human in the loop. It's about having an agent in the loop, right? So you have actually the lead is still done by the buyer, but the agent is the one that supports the buyer. But I think over time, when the agents get better and better and better, I think a lot of the transactional work or the preparation for meetings or all that stuff, it's all agents. So I think only the sexy stuff remains with the buyers. So I
Mhm.
think actually the job of the buyers become much more interesting, in my opinion.
So, do you think in the future it will be every buyer will have its own agent or group of agents that will work for him?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. If you think about agents and how many agents and who should manage those agents, I think everybody should have a personal assistant, right? And that's an agent that can write your emails. They can they can do like basic steps that are part of your day-to-day job. But then I think you can also have agents that are specialized in specific tasks, like a negotiation agent. I don't know if every buyer should be able to configure their own agent. We're playing around with agents. I can't say I have a personal assistant. I use I don't know, 5 different LLM models, and I use them for different pieces of work. Right? If I want this, I go to OpenAI. If I want this, I go to DeepSeek. If I want
Yeah.
that, I go to Perplexity, Claude, etc. But I think everybody should be playing around with these tools.
A lot
Um,
of procurement people are afraid of implementing AI because they are afraid of losing their job. Do you think that's fair fear from their side?
well, I think the chance of losing your job is a lot higher if you don't use AI.
Mm.
So I think the people that will lose their jobs are the ones that don't use AI.
Mm.
Um, and I think the people that are curious and learning and playing around are the ones that will outperform everybody else. So I think it's a bit like saying I don't want to use a calculator, right? It's like, okay, well, there were people at the time, right? They said, well, I don't want to use calculator because it dumbs me down, right? And I want to
Hmm.
be good at this, and those people didn't win. Um,
Yeah.
they didn't win. They didn't score points by that type of attitude, right? So I think we can take that to today's world and say, well, embrace the tools, right? And some schools embrace students to use it, and some of them don't. And
Mhm.
I think the best schools embrace, or they encourage people to use it, and the best companies do the same, right? I think they encourage
Yeah.
their people to use it. And but I think we just had somebody that joined us recently, a very young guy, and I asked him about AI, and he said, "Oh, I'm trying to use it as little as possible." And
Wow.
then like,
Okay.
okay, I said, "Why is that?" It's like, yeah, because if this thing does everything for me, I won't be able to do it myself. And I was like, yeah, and what's wrong with that? Yeah, but
Yeah, it's
it's
not
it's
if, it's how to use it, right? We have to learn
yes,
how to use it so it support us, right?
yeah,
But yeah, if,
yeah,
I think it's not a question,
no,
it's
exactly.
when.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
it's not. It's also. I mean, we went on a road trip in the US once, and I decided not to download. I mean, that was a TomTom map, right? I said, okay,
Okay.
let's just go and take a normal map, and we figure out on the map. And it's kind of also nice to do these things, and you go back in time. And that on that, then we didn't really have Google Maps on our phone to the same extent. Um, yeah, so it's you lose these skills if you
Yeah.
don't use them. But I think it's not. I mean, it's okay, right? I mean, I can still
Hmm.
do simple calculations while you have an order of magnitude, and I'm still using a calculator, right? So
Yeah.
it's and right. Educate yourself and use the tools that you have at your disposal to do your job better.
Thank you for your time. I do appreciate it. I enjoy our conversation, and hopefully we will meet
Yeah,
um, somewhere soon for a
maybe in
coffee.
the future. Okay, very
Yeah.
good. Thank you,
Okay.
Anne.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much. Bye.